So, we've got some interesting topics for this session, and I really hope that some of you have some comments or questions about some of these topics. Some of them are pretty straightforward and kind of make sense. Oh, you can see Tow's with us too, hanging out, taking a rest. Some of these topics are really straightforward, and others lend themselves more towards debate or opinions. And with some of the things we're going to talk about today, um, there can be some strong opinions either way on them, and we'll talk about those a little bit. Um, the first thing I want to dive into, so we have three things I want to talk about today. And again, this hour is open for you to ask any questions about anything. So I have no problem if you just throw a question and that's nothing about anything we're talking about. It's all good. Or you can chime in on comments and questions about what the topics are. So our topics for this evening will be different types and different breeds of dogs and what makes them different. When you're thinking about getting a dog for yourself, maybe what to consider if which breed is for you. All right, there's Tao. All right, we have them both. And what to consider. So it's really important when you're looking for a dog to find the right match for you or your family. So we'll talk a little bit about differences in dog breeds and maybe what to look for. The other thing we'll talk about, because what's been really big in my life this week is different dogs' jobs. So kind of how different breeds and how different temperaments and different traits lend to different dog jobs. And some of you out there may also chime in on dog jobs that I don't talk about, which would be really great to learn about. Specifically today, this summer for 6 weeks, I'm teaching at Hartford's Camp Current here in Connecticut, and Tao and I are doing yoga with the kids 5 days a week. And today we had a little day off, and we had a special law enforcement day, but it's still full of dogs, and it was still amazing with a bunch of officers and different types of dogs. So we had dogs that are called facility dogs, that are more comfort dogs, service dogs, and then we also had canine handlers with their patrol dogs, showing us some of their protection work and some of their detection work, and then just having fun with the kids. So it got me really thinking about dogs with jobs, and it lends itself a little bit to breeds and genetics. So I thought they tied together. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, which sometimes comes into play when we're having these conversations about different breeds, is the idea of rehoming a dog and kind of what that looks like. And that's a very individual process for each person. And that's where we may have some opinions around that and what that looks like. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we'll get started on our first topic, which is dog breeds. So there are a lot of dog breeds out there. Different dogs, different temperaments, different sizes, purebred dogs, and now we're also seeing a big mix of purebred dogs. So we have a lot of doodles, right? Is a good example. So like Bernedoodles, Golden Doodles, Labradors, mixing the two breeds and kind of making this other breed, right, or type of dog that is now becoming really popular, right? So different things come with that. So different breeds will bring up different traits. So it really depends on what you're looking for in a dog. So we'll start with German Shepherds because that's what I have. That's what's here with me tonight. German Shepherds tend to have certain traits that they come with, right? They're very driven, very smart. If we don't do a lot of training with them, you can get some naughty behaviors, like sometimes reactivity, barking at people or barking at dogs. There is an element of suspicion in the breed, so they tend to be a little wary of strangers, but are also super loyal to their family and those that are in their circle. And then there's a varying degree in the breed of sociability and how social they are with people and other dogs, and how more reserved they are. Sometimes the breed can be called aloof, right? So that means that they're really into their person and kind of don't care about what else is going on. That can help with trainability with distractions. I've had 3 German Shepherds as an adult. I had 3 as a kid too, but 3 as an adult, and they were all a little bit different. But River, who's here right now hanging out, he's cut out of the screen. He's the most social shepherd I've had. He almost reminded me of a golden retriever. And he's very vocal, so he'd like to like sing at people. So that required a lot of training on my part to keep him with me and not necessarily going to say hi to everybody else that was around us. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I knew he was social. That's why I got him and asked the breeder about him, which works out great in my everyday life. But I had to train that so that he didn't run up to people. With a breed of German Shepherd, if my 85 pound full grown shepherd runs up to somebody, it can be a little startling, even if he's just coming to say hello, which is all he would probably do. Um, but people are startled by that, right? Just because of the particular breed. Other breeds can lend themselves to that. Most people say, oh, it's a golden retriever. It's not a big deal. But golden retrievers have certain traits, right? But there's also a spectrum in that as well that can be more atypical for the breed, too. So with that being said, I have a really social German Shepherd. Yes, he's still within the range of the breed. He's on kind of one end of it, and he wants to say hi to everybody. That required a lot of training. I never had to deal with that before. Tao, who's with us, is super social, but if I'm out and about with her, she doesn't. She just is with me. It's just who she is. And my last shepherd was the same way. He was just like, I'm with you. He didn't mind if other people pet him or said hi to him, but it wasn't the same. Whereas River sought that out. So that was kind of like, whoa, I had to shift gears in how I train. So that's just talking about the German Shepherd, some of the traits. Thinking about breeds, so Golden Retriever is another one, right? They're very social. They make really good family pets. They love other dogs. With that being said, their sociability and excitability and enthusiasm to be social, we also have to train with that. They may jump on people, right? We don't want them to knock anyone over with that love and enthusiasm. So within every breed, we get them in certain types of dogs for specific reasons, for our lifestyle, and also for those traits that we love. But that means we have to kind of shift gears in our training to meet who that dog is. Different breeds, different tendencies. So let's talk a little bit about doodles and doodle mixes when we're thinking about the mix of the breeds. Just a good example. I think it's a good example to talk about because I work with a lot of different ones and they're all a little bit different. And what I've noticed is the uniqueness in each, right? Because you are taking two different breeds and you're mixing them together. So you're going to get some traits of one, some traits of the other. Poodles are very, very smart. Um, and that helps to really show up in the doodle mixes because they really want to learn and do all of that work. And you can also mix that with, if it's a golden, the golden sociability and high energy. So sometimes you can get a combination of a really fast, high energy dog that wants to do everything at lightning speed because it's really smart and it's moving, right? So these dogs are highly, highly trainable, but also hard to control when you're in social situations. So that's an example of maybe how those traits might come together. So yes, we can teach them really fast, but they're going to always want to move quickly. And sometimes you can get in a space where you're almost feeling like you're trying to outrun them or outspeed them, when really we need to slow them down. I've also met some Labradoodles, for instance, that are super low key. So a little more like a really low key Labrador, and still really smart in the trainability, but their energy is really low. Some of the people I work with said that they have a litter mate and their friend has a litter mate, and one is really chill and one is really active and activated, even in that litter. So in every litter, each pup is going to be different, but some litters are more uniform depending on how those genetics come together. And ideally, we want that if we're trying to produce the same consistent temperament to people who are getting our dogs, if you're a breeder. And if you're a rescue and you're evaluating litters, you have a litter of puppies come into your rescue, you really want to look what's the range in those temperament. Maybe look at some temperament testing with those pups. So when you're placing them, you can see the range of how those traits came together. Some traits with dogs in certain breeds, if they're mixes or purebred, don't show up until later in life. So I've had people call me and say, I got a Rottweiler, right? And, I meet with the family, and the Rottweiler is really low key, low energy. And then we hit like that 5, 6, 7 month mark, and we start to see other characteristics come out. And with certain breeds, those might be some more protectiveness, some more suspicion. these developmental windows that you're not going to see, and traits that come with those developmental windows aren't necessarily traits that you're going to see right off the bat when they're a young puppy, right? They're a young puppy, they're doing puppy things. There are certain things we can also see in puppyhood that might lend themselves to um, behaviors that occur as they develop. So you can see some of those things. Some things are going to show up because it's the natural progression in that breed. I had a cane corso mix. Her name was Moose. She was a fantastic dog, but definitely some of her traits showed up more in terms of her being a little more protective in maturity now. So she was like 4 or 5 when she really felt like she had fully reached that point. So that's a little bit later. It probably wasn't always there, right? There were little hints of it, but didn't come out till later. So each breed is a little different. Again, she was a mix, so who knows exactly what that is, and we just work with each dog as we have them. But if you're looking at specific breed, when you're going to pick out a dog, you want to look, there's a ton online. If you start searching any breed, it can be almost overwhelming of what you can find. But really figuring out what the traits are of that dog and if those are traits that match your lifestyle. So a good example is if you want an active dog that can hang with your kids and maybe you can run with, you can go on daily runs with in the morning and having that mix. Finding the right dog that's active enough to do that, but also is really social and appropriate with kids, right? You're going to start to look at all those traits and how they come together. So there's some dogs that make really good running partners, but aren't necessarily going to love having tons of kids in your backyard and hanging out, right? They may have other behaviors like chase behaviors where they want to chase a toy all the time or they want to chase the kids. So really thinking about your full picture in your life before you look at those breeds, but looking up, doing some research on what the traits of that breed are or supposed to be. So when you're talking to breeders and you're asking, because it's a little bit of an interview process if you're going to research getting a dog from a reputable breeder, you know what kind of questions to ask. And when you're meeting their dogs, whether it's their dogs that they own or dogs that have been placed in families and you're able to meet them or interacting with the parents of an upcoming litter or something like that, you want to be able to see if you can see those traits. Or are they sociable? Do they approach me? Are they friendly? How excitable are they? Do they get along with the other dogs? Some questions you want to ask, right? How much energy and exercise do your dogs need every day? Because even in, say, the Labrador Retriever, there is a wide range from hunting dogs to service dogs. And the temperament and the range of that dog is different. The exercise that a hunting dog needs every day is very different than a dog that is being bred for service work in terms of what their service work is. Again, you can have everything in the middle in that range for family pets. But looking at the traits that you want and making sure that when you're talking to a breeder, you are asking about those things. Sometimes we fall into a trap, and I've had this happen where people have gotten dogs. They're like, "Steph, it's such a cool dog. Like it's so cool looking, and it does these cool things, and it's really smart, and we like that dog." And I can say I appreciate that, right? Like I appreciate Malinois, right? Um, or a Dutch Shepherd, right? They're a working dog. They're a police dog. They're very fast moving. I know for me and my lifestyle that I'm better with German Shepherds because they're a little bit slower paced. They think a little bit more about things, whereas the reaction time of a Malinois or Dutch Shepherd is a lot quicker, and you train a little differently with them, right? It's almost like flavors of ice cream, right? Like I love them all, but one is more is my favorite, right? Or is suited to me and fits my personality. So even within just those breeds right there, there's little tiny differences. So you want to think it could be a cool dog, but and really smart and cool looking, but does your lifestyle match that dog? So whether you're looking at a rescue or you're looking at getting a dog from a breeder, thinking about your lifestyle and how those traits come together, and you can absolutely have an appreciation for that breed and all breeds, but not necessarily say like I should bring that home, right? And knowing what your lifestyle is and what that demands. Living with Tao and our other dog Sadie, they're retired from a guide dog program, so they're active even at almost 11 and almost 12 years old. They start very active in the yard, but they have really nice off switches. You can see Tao's just done with her day and hanging out with us. River's hanging out with me too, probably because it's hot out and he likes the air conditioning in here. his needs are different. When I decided to bring him into my life, I knew that my lifestyle would be different, that I need to meet his exercise needs at a minimum each day. Um, I was sharing with someone earlier that, River, last weekend, it's been hot here in Connecticut, so I took him paddleboarding down the river and put a life jacket on him, and we went for an hour and a half, and he swam while I paddled, and then he'd get out and run the muddy riverbanks, which is hard to run in the mud. And then on the way back, almost swam the whole length back, with a ball in his mouth the whole time. So working that. In the summer, it's the best way for me to exercise him. The water and swimming is so good for him, but it keeps him nice and cool. But we did that for an hour and a half, and he still came back into the yard and wanted me to keep playing ball with him. So his exercise needs are pretty high, and I was aware of that. And I knew when I did that, my lifestyle would change while I'm committed to him and have him in my life. So thinking about that, right? And I like to train, and my dogs come with me everywhere, and I'm able to do that. So it works pretty well. But even with a schedule change, like for the next 6 weeks, I said I'm teaching at camp. River is created when I'm not here. He gets a break midday, but then I have to make sure at the end of my days that I'm spending enough time with him, right? Because for 6 weeks, he's not going everywhere with me like he usually does. If we're prepping for trials, he gets really like 3 really great training sessions a day, pretty intense training sessions. So committing to that lifestyle with your dog, right? That's not for everybody. If River didn't have his outlets, like his training and his exercise outlets, I would get some problem behaviors, right? I'd get some maybe destructive behavior in the home, some frustration barking. If I'm out and about, he might start barking at other dogs and people because he's frustrated and kind of peds up. So I know that about him, and to kind of keep him balanced. He doesn't naturally want to do any of those things, but I know if I go 3 days and he doesn't have enough of a mental workout, uh, he lets me know by barking at me and saying, "Hey, like I need a little something," right? And that's his way to communicate that I haven't done enough with him. So lifestyle, right? I'm just giving you an example of what I do with him, but really important. I also loved having a mastiff who was super chill. Like we could do a little bit of exercise, and she just lounged and hung out, and that was so amazing. And I really, really enjoyed having her energy and her to balance out my shepherds at the time. So thinking about your lifestyle, being really honest with yourself and realistic about the lifestyle you want to lead with your dog, and then bringing a dog into that fold. That's when you'll have a nice fit with your dog. And this brings us, I'll loop back to that idea of your dog matching your lifestyle. And when we get into rehoming, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when it's a mismatch. And there's work that can be done to meet each other in the middle and find that. And sometimes there's a mismatch where the better option is to rehome and figure out, okay, this dog should live in this lifestyle, and this is really the dog I should have instead. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's where some opinions come in. But that's a very individual conversation to have with yourself, and a very individual decision depending on your circumstances. Talking about dogs with jobs. So I mentioned a moment ago that there's dogs, like let's just talk about service dogs. There's a lot of different service dogs. Service dogs are being used in mental health. They're being used for PTSD. There's diabetic alert dogs, seizure alert dogs. Dogs are used to detect cancer. It's a type of work in terms of like service using their sense. Guide dogs, right? And then there's stability dogs. There's dogs assisting people in wheelchairs, mobility dogs. A lot out there. There's dogs that are being matched with children and families. So it's the family, parents and children are also supporting it as one big team. Yeah, and a lot of variation within that. So thinking about those type of dogs, a lot of them are Labrador retrievers, poodles. We're seeing doodle mixes in that, right? If someone needs a hypoallergenic dog and the temperament is such to match that because they're really smart, and if they're low energy, that can be a really nice match. And Labrador retrievers are used a lot, golden retrievers. Labrador retrievers are such a versatile breed, and you'll see them a lot in service work because of the different attributes. They're very smart. They're typically stable as the breed should be. kind of at lower key on the energy, right? Um, they have a natural retrieve, so picking up items when people drop them, they can be all different statures, but they can be larger, right? So if somebody needs them for mobility or stability, they can brace on them and they can use them in that way. So they're a larger dog. Just a very versatile breed. They can be higher energy. So if somebody, say, someone has a guide dog, right, and they do a lot of city work, and be a dog with a little bit more drive, or there's someone who's a little more low key or more of a part time guide dog user. Maybe the person needs a dog 3 times a week, shorter routes. Dog can be more low key. There are also Goldens that do guide work. German Shepherds do guide work as well. But again, looking at the breed tendencies for service work, um, when you see the majority of dogs like out there, a lot of them are labs, lab crosses, and we're seeing poodles and poodle mixes as well with that, with the hypoallergenic side of things. Um, Moving along kind of from dogs that have lower energy, drives are more suited for that type of work. We do talk about facility dogs, which are really blossoming programs here in Connecticut, and I think all over the country, is police officers with police service dogs called facility dogs. These dogs provide connection and comfort in the communities, and are a really nice way to help people de-stress, to help cope with trauma incidents, and all different types of things that happen within a law enforcement community, but also communities in towns that these officers or even college campuses, um, these officers are working. Another form of service dog, but it's almost like they're sharing that service dog, and the dog's job is to provide service to each individual it is interacting with. So really, really cool way to incorporate dogs into our communities. So the other end of some working dogs can be police dogs as well that are more used for patrol, protection, finding people when they're lost, apprehension, those type of things. You're going to have a little bit more drive and a little bit more intensity with that dog, right? And they need to have that in order to persist and do their job in that way. Different breeds for that: Malinois Dutch Shepherd, mixes of those with German Shepherds and purebred German Shepherds. A lot of those are the common breeds. You'll also see pointers doing detection, detection dog companies that have dogs or labs, different types of shepherds, different hunting dogs will have more high drive dogs where they need to use their nose for long durations of time while they're working. So some of those, talking about dogs with jobs, when we're thinking about breeds, it's just something I open up. I don't have to go deep dive into working dogs because we could be here all night because I love that topic. But the idea is looking when you're observing different dogs working, or you're seeing that pop up in your social media feeds, thinking about dogs that have particular jobs. There's a reason breeds lend themselves better to certain jobs, and we use those breeds, right? Or mixes of those breeds versus others. All right, well, let's see. We have a question. Hey, Carolyn. The question is, would you comment on dog reactivity to other dogs while on walks, passes by, and turning back in a U shape with back up? U shape while backing up. Are Carolyn, are you asking if that's a good way to work on dog reactivity, or are you asking for me to explain it as a tool to use with dog reactive dogs? Is it something that, like, I guess, yeah, how do I phrase that question back? um, Great. I think you mean describing it as a skill. All right. And you can pop in comments, Carolyn, if I'm not answering this correctly. It's occurring technique to deal. Perfect. All right. So that's a really great one. I work with a lot of people who have reactive dogs, and this does not necessarily mean aggression. This can mean your dog is stimulated or fearful, and let's just say is barking at that dog, right? It's exploding, right? It's coming from this place of fear, which is usually a lot of times where it's coming from. So what we want to work on with our dogs is thinking about what we do with our bodies to help give them the signal, um, that they should be orienting toward us for direction in those situations and not necessarily reacting. So how we work with them is, and Carolyn, I want to talk a little bit about just how I work with dogs that are reactive and talk about that technique. So ideally, when a dog is reacting, instead of our dog reacting at that other dog and disengaging from us and turning away from us and reacting, we would want to have our dog engage back with us, right? For direction is how I look at that. So what Carolyn had talked about, which we've probably done together, Carolyn, is when your dog's reacting, backing up away from the stimulus, backing away from that other dog, giving more distance to help support your dog, backing them up, having your dog sit, and usually using food toward your dog for coming back to you. This way, your dog is not oriented toward the dog. They are physically turning around. They're facing you, and you can reward that behavior. Typically, what I'll do, Carolyn, and anyone else out there that's working with reactivity, is starting off with a lot of distance, more distance from that dog than you think you need. And I understand that not every neighborhood and situation where you might walk your dog, this is completely possible to do. But I will start with a dog that I know has reactivity. Once I've seen that reactivity, and establish a distance. So even in a neighborhood, if I can go up someone's driveway, my neighbor's driveway, while the dog goes by, I will get as much distance as I'm starting working with a dog reactive dog as I can, to have that dog work with me. Distance is going to be your friend. Over time, once you've established that connection with your dog, you can decrease that distance. So what I'll typically do is get distance if a dog is walking past me with a reactive dog, and have my dog sit in front of me. And I can start with just them sitting calmly, oriented toward me, and I'll feed for that. Eventually, I'd like a dog to offer eye contact, right? A little bit more connection there, and you can work eye contact at home. Really, just if your dog makes eye contact with you, telling them yes, and then giving them a treat. Every time they make eye contact, yes, and treat. So I build that eye contact at my house, inside in every room of my house, outside in my backyard, on leash in my front yard, and every time I get out somewhere new with my dog. So building that in, and then you can bring it into walks where you sit with your dog when there's no dogs around. Have your dog sit and check in with you. Your dog sit and check in with you. Establishing this connection with your dog, that their default becomes sit in front of me and be with me. We're going to get there, Carolyn, how it ties to what you're working on. So if you get distance, stop your dog from being in motion. A lot of dogs, when they're in motion, are building. They're building momentum, and when they see a dog coming, your body, their body, the other person's body, and their dog's body are all oriented towards each other. So you're getting this, they're coming together, build, 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 and whether this dog responds or not, your dog is going to blow up, because there's this building of pressure. There's no interruption of the dogs staring at each other. That just keeps coming until it's like it's going to crash, right? So if a dog is coming, I'm going to let that dog pass by. I'm going to move up a driveway. I'm going to have my dog sit. This dog can go by. My dog is sitting, checking in. I'm rewarding all of that. Once the dog goes by, I tell my dog they're the best dog because they didn't react. And then I continue on my path. That's where I start. Letting dogs pass by if I can do that, right? If a dog is in a yard, it's a little bit harder, right? That's going to be a little bit more management in the beginning stages. I might just be feeding my dog to try to get them by. Again, I'm getting as much distance so my dog isn't reacting, right? And I at least can say, good, super. I'm rewarding them, feeding them, not just feeding them to get them by it. That happens if you have to manage. But I really want my dog just feeling like, okay, I don't need to react at this distance, and I'm getting paid for it. But ideally, I like to always move. I still do this with all of my dogs. I've been trained to do this, even though they weren't reactive, but they were puppies. But I teach this to prevent reactivity, because in German Shepherds, it can be pretty prevalent in the breed, just because they're excited about dogs, they're thinking, they might be challenged by another dog. So I start it when they're young puppies. I just teach them, we move over. So even to this day, Cal's going to be 11, River's 4. We're on a trail. I call them if they're off leash. We move over. They sit. They wait for the person to go by. They hang out. No reaction. They check in with me. They get up all their food. We keep going. I unclip their leashes and carry on if they can be off leash. If not, they're on leash and we keep going. They know that. They don't even think anything of that. It would be too much for me with 2 dogs on leash, even though my dogs are trained with me to walk nicely on leash with another dog. If that dog reacts and now I've got my dog's reacting, it's just kind of a recipe for disaster. My dogs also can rely on me to take control of situations with other dogs, and your dog will learn that too, to be able to trust you when you're out with them, right? So this is also kind of a promise I make to my dog in the beginning stages. I'm going to move you away from this. If you're reacting, you're letting me know you're too close and you feel unsafe. All right, gotcha. So before it can even happen, I see the dog coming. I'm going to get as much distance as I think my dog needs. If they start to react, you just get a little more distance and ask for the sit. Working your check-ins, do your homework, work on it at home in low distractions. Then you're going to work it out on the street. Always moving aside, letting them go by if I have that choice. Then you're going to decrease your distance. When we talk about the call back to you, Carolyn, and if anyone's thinking about that, we're going to loop back to that because that was your original question. So typically dogs are going by, I'm going to move over, my dog's going to check in. Promise to my dog is I've got it handled. Another promise I'm making, and this is going to build trust in your relationship, right? And the more you strengthen your trust in your relationship with your dog, the more they look to you for the answers, the more they stop reacting, right? Because they're like, you've got this. My promise is I'm not going to let anybody in your safe bubble, whatever that is for that dog. For my dogs, that might be a 6-foot radius around them. So if that dog's going by, I'm not going to allow the dog to come in 6 feet any way around us. Some dogs, that bubble's 20 feet. It really depends on your dog, and that bubble can shrink. But that's my promise to my dog is no dogs are going to approach you, because I'm going to tell the other person, no, please don't approach my dog, because what starts happening is your dog stops reacting and then people get closer to you, right? Because when you have a scary German Shepherd, I got German Shepherds, right? And they're blowing up and reacting, people do not approach you. But once your dog is under control, you may get that. So it's really on you, if you want to build that trust with your dog, to say, hey, no, I'm sorry, we're training, thanks. Because they'll say, what a beautiful dog. Your dog is so well trained. Your dog is so good. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great walk. My promise to my dogs is they're not going to approach. This way they feel safe. They trust me. They'll trust you, that no dog is just going to come up to them. Even if your dog's social, all of my dogs are social, they will greet dogs. I don't know who that other dog is, so I'm not willing to risk and leverage my relationship with my dog and all that hard work I've done on the off chance that that greeting could go bad and reinforce the dog reactivity you're working so hard on. Hey, bud. So thinking about that idea. Now thinking about your walking, right? So you're walking and let's just say a dog is coming towards you, because in a lot of neighborhoods where we walk our dogs, that's what's going to be happening. So what I would do to help my dog here, and this is what you kind of brought up, Carolyn, is a great technique, is two dogs are walking like this. You want to start this way at a distance, because again, as they get closer, right, what's going to happen? They're going to build, right? So they're getting closer and you're going to get that. So what I'm going to do is, we'll work from the side, is dogs are getting closer. You have two options here. You can say your dog's name, take a couple steps back, show them that you have food, call them to you. So say it was River. River, come. Call him to me, sit, and start working on him checking in from that distance, if that's enough distance. Or you can call him to you. Yeah, super. Just get his attention. Then I'm going to walk up a driveway or turn around and walk and get myself a little bit more distance in someone's yard or a side street, and then work my check-in from there. So that could be a nice transition from you're walking towards each other, call your dog to you, orient, get yourself where you need to be, get your distance, and support your dog that way. So that can be a way to disrupt that stare that can happen between dogs and all that pressure. When your dog is called to you, it decreases that pressure and intensity. The staring stops. It breaks that whole energy that's building. They orient towards you, which is where you want them, where you can kind of have that trust, right? Where you trust me. That other dog coming, the other person's like, he's friendly. You're like, I'm sorry, we're training. Please don't approach my dog. And you don't have to say anything more than that. No, please don't say hello to my dog. We're in training. And I say no to people all the time, and typically don't have a problem. You're going to occasionally get somebody that's like, what? Your dog's not friendly? And they might say that, and you're like, no, I'm sorry, we're just training. And you can carry on or turn around the other way and go the other way. Most people, if you say it in a really positive tone, just say, hey, we're working on some training, but thank you for asking. They're really good. Again, that's my promise to my dog. I'm not going to allow them, someone to breach their bubble. Something that I find is can even be more effective than calling your dog back. Because what happens if you have a dog that's a little more nervous, or you run out of food, right? And so you try to call your dog that one time and they're kind of like stuck, maybe they're still staring. It's kind of like a sticky response, I call it. It's not automatic response because they're really nervous about that dog and they don't want to turn their back to that dog. One thing I actually like even better than the calling back to technique and backing up, and this can be really seamless, is if your dog is on the left side, you're coming towards the other dog. Say, my dog is here where my thumb is. You're coming here towards the dog. I'm going to turn left into my dog. So what's happening is I'm going to turn left and I'm just go the other way. Then I'm going to find my distance. So you're coming together, you turn left into your dog, you're cutting your dog off. So as the dogs are looking at each other, you're almost coming here and you're taking a left and you're turning your dog around. So you're making a U-turn. Instead of your dog making that U-turn to you, your dog's here on your left, you're going to turn and your dog will drop back. This you don't need food for. So on your walks, I would throw these type of turns in. You're taking a left turn, you're going to cut your dog off. Your dog is going to drop back and you're going to literally see your dog building pressure. The second you cut them off, they're going to drop down. A lot of them will look up at you using your body language, because what's happening is when you're walking towards a dog, remember you're squared up. You're facing it too. So you're bringing all of your intention and attention there. For a dog, it's a clear signal. When you take that left and you turn away from it, they're like, oh, your body language, because you're not oriented to it, you're giving that dog the right signal. Then you can move however you want to move. Maybe it's turn around and go back the other way, right? You don't have an exit where you have to go up a driveway or whatever it is. That technique, I just teach my dogs when we walk. Sometimes I take a left turn and we keep going, and then I take another left turn and then we continue our walk. And I just build those in randomly during my walks. That way, when you see a dog, your dog already knows that behavior. It's not the only time they see it is when they're under high distraction. We don't turn to the right as much in this. Well, at least I don't. I do teach my dogs right turns. I teach them to come with me when I'm out. If they're off leash and we're working on obedience on a hike, or on leash as I'm returning to the car, I'm like, are you really with me? I'll make a right turn. The difference with the right turn is if your dog is here on the left side, remember when they're on the left side, we cut them off and they're going to drop back. When you're going to the right and the dog, say, was in front of you here, your dog is then swinging out. So think about supporting your dog. If your dog is out here by themselves, they don't feel supported by you because you're way back here. There's not much you can do here. When you cut them off, you put yourself in between and you take control of the situation, right? Your dog's back here, the other dog's here. If you're turning this way, you're kind of leaving them out there like kind of high and dry, like, all right, hope it, because of your body positioning. There's so much, like we use food in training, but say like you ran out of food, for instance, that left turn is going to diffuse the whole situation. What do you do if you take that right turn? Your dog's out there and you don't have food to catch them if they lose it. So there's so much going on with our body language. So I found that the left turn works a lot better, because sometimes if my dog's there and I'm trying to call them back, they have to kind of make that right turn to come back into me. So Carolyn, you can try if you're playing with that. Are you playing with that with your girl at home? If that's what you're working on, I would try some of the left turns. And I would work on the check-ins and the call back and backing up again, because distance is your friend. Yeah. Do you have any questions, Carolyn, on the techniques of the left turn or some of the distance and kind of getting her stationary? Makes sense. Perfect. Yep. So all of our body cues. The other thing I'll layer in, since we're talking about reactivity, which is something I talk about with everybody I work with, reactivity, because we do a lot. So I teach dog yoga, which all the concepts of yoga also apply to dog training in terms of our body language. Our dogs are paying attention to us more than anything. It's your body language, which also taps into your own energy level, your presence of how attentive you are to them. So if you're distracted with your phone, or even if you're walking your dog and you're listening to music and you can't hear what's going on, they're picking up on all of that. And they're picking up on the fact of how present you are. Your breathing is a big one. So anytime you're working with dog reactivity, it's very challenging when you know your dog's going to react, to see a dog and not tense up. So the first thing we do is hold our breath. Someone's like, no, it travels down the leash, Stef. But what I've learned about teaching dog yoga is even if your dog is laying next to you and there's not a leash involved, if you're tense, your dog doesn't settle. The more you can relax and settle in, your dog will start to settle in too. So just something to think about in the intent you bring to it when you see a dog. So changing that little bit of that narrative for yourself is you're out with your dog. These might be some tips to start trying. Like, okay, I have a plan now. Like I know what to do when I see a dog rather than go, I see a dog and my dog's going to react. So most of us that have reactive dogs instantly have a little bit of panic, right? Uh-oh, my dog's going to react. I just saw a dog. By even saying that to yourself, we set that intention and it happens, right? Because it just plays out because that's where we're putting our energy and our focus is we're focusing on the dog, we're stop breathing, we're tense, and our dog's hackles go up. And then in like 3, 2, 1, it's like a 3-second countdown. If we don't interrupt it on the first second, they're exploding. And it happens so quickly because it's your breathing, it's your energy, it's our intention. So something that you might want to shift is it doesn't mean that you're going to breathe differently right away. Like that comes with practice. Is saying to yourself, and sometimes I've even said it out loud, and I've had clients say it out loud, and they're like, "This is great." Is I've got this. When I say I've got this, it's like I say it with confidence, right? It's hard to say I've got this with any question. So sometimes I'll walk with my dogs. I see a dog, I'm like, or I've got you. Like, I've got you. Doesn't mean I'm not feeling inside like, oh my gosh, but I'm like, I've got this, I've got you is a message you're saying out loud. You can say it in your head. You're saying to yourself, you're shifting yourself into this more of a confident stance. I've got this, I'm in control of this. This is what your dog needs. I've got this. Take that left turn, get yourself in position. Even if you're just starting to sit with your dog and feed them. Like, I see you, I got you. This is what we're going to work on. The more you have that plan, the more you do that, you eventually will start to breathe a little differently and that. But sometimes in the beginning, if you're like, I'm gonna fake it till I make it, like that's all good. Once you start to really build that pattern, instead of it's like I see a dog, oh, this is gonna go bad. Instead, you're like, I got this. I'm getting you into a situation. I'm setting you up. The more consistent you can be, and energetically, like I've got you. This is what I'm doing. No dogs are gonna come in your bubble. This is my promise to you. It's like I've got you, right? I've got this. That security will change the picture for your dog and for you. So even if that's your takeaway with this, it's like, I've got this. It's like, I've got it. And eventually it will feel differently because you and your dog will establish a pattern where you don't react and you don't have to react to their reactivity because it's really happening with the both of you, right? Your dog's has a propensity maybe to be visually excited by that, sees a dog, isn't sure for whatever reason. And we're just saying like, hey, you don't need to do that anymore. Come over here. I'm with you. No dogs are gonna come in your bubble, and I'm gonna keep you safe. So I love that question, Carolyn. That's a good one. That was like a little bit of a deep dive. When we're talking about reactivity, it's never a simple answer. Every dog is a little bit different, but I'm sharing with you the main techniques that I work with dogs that seem to be really supportive about the relationship piece. And I try to keep it nice and simple because um, when our dogs are going into a state where they feel like they need to react, the simpler and more consistent we can be, the better with that, right? Rather than asking for a bunch of different things because they're barely able to keep it together just to sit nicely and quietly for you, right? So let's make it really simple. We start there, then we work on eye contact, then we work on getting a little closer. And eventually you can work on walking by dogs, right? As we advance that. Um, but yeah, I love that question, Carolyn. So thank you so much. And I'm just so happy you're here. It's so nice to have you here. All right. We have about 15 minutes. So I want to leave space. Again, chime in your questions at any time. So I want to touch briefly on the idea of rehoming dogs because it can be a sensitive topic for people. And there can be strong opinions. Some people, over the course of working with dogs for about 20 years, um, I've heard a lot of different things. There's a lot of judgment around rehoming and a lot of opinions. And I think it's such an individual process. So I've worked with people through a lot of different behavioral problems with their dogs, relationship, connection, strengthening all of that. And it's been beautiful, right? And the transformation. Sometimes when we're talking about breeds and why rehoming kind of ties to that is sometimes it's a mismatch. You get a dog with particular traits, it's a mismatch in your life. And when you make that choice to rehome, it's for the best of that dog because you're like, yeah, this is my lifestyle, this is my work schedule. And like, I don't feel like it's fair. I'm not giving this dog what it needs. So you make the responsible decision to work with an organization or you have a friend or somebody to rehome that to a home that's a good match with, right? So that's supporting your dog, right? You realize, okay, I got this dog, or my lifestyle changed drastically, and I'm not able to have this dog. I've had experience with people who have had a dog, had the lifestyle with a dog, and they have children. And unfortunately, even with work, the dog isn't safe with kids. Um, Still an awesome dog, but it's stressful for the dog and it's a safety concern for children. And people rehome their dogs to a home that doesn't have young children. Maybe the dog is fine with teenagers or older kids. Dog has a beautiful life, right? That's a safety concern. I still talk to people through the years that say, like, no, you should never rehome. It's a lifelong commitment. Um, and that opinion is valid, right? If that's how someone feels. It's also a valid opinion to say, this is for the safety of my family and I love my dog and it's heartbreaking. The people I've coached through that process, it's really heartbreaking. When the dog goes to where it is and lands and has a beautiful life in its new home, um, there is some closure there. So there's different reasons people rehome dogs. So I'm always really open about it. I'm somebody who's happy to ever answer questions and talk to people about that process. I've worked with people where we've worked on behaviors, worked on behaviors. The behaviors have improved tremendously. But again, it's a safety concern. The dog might be fighting with another dog in the home, where the dog that's being attacked has to go to the vet. Um, and it's significant. So even with training, it sometimes with everything you're doing, it's still a safety concern for the other animals in the home. And I'm thinking of one particular case that I was working with, a family I was working with, that when that dog went into a different home where it was the only dog, the dog thrived and its stress level went down, and the rest of the household with the other dogs, they all relaxed, right, and went back. And sometimes you don't realize until you make that decision and you make that shift that that was the best decision. It's hard when you're in it because it's extremely painful and difficult to. Our dogs are part of our family. To say like this is no longer where you fit, or this, or we tried it. We rescued a dog and we tried it for 6 months to a year, and once the dog settled in, this is what we're getting, right? So this idea, there's many different situations. And there can be some judgment around that. And I know the biggest thing when I'm working with people who are making a decision to rehome is that self judgment, and like a societal pressure that we commit to our dogs and we shouldn't rehome. Personally, I've had um, two dogs that I rescued, either from a shelter, a local animal shelter, and one from a rescue. And both were very different experiences, had different behavioral things. Um, one of my first dog carried a lot of her things that happened in her early puppyhood and her young into life. And for the 11 years I had her, um, still some of it was there, right? As much as we worked on it, and it worked for my lifestyle at that time. And my second rescue just kind of seamlessly fell into my life. um, Basic training. She was really easy. My mastiff, she was just like this cool dog, right? And it was just like I can roll. Didn't really carry any trauma. You would have no idea that she was abandoned in an apartment and found, and you would never know. I would never know. So dogs, when they come into our lives, they carry. So I've had two dogs that were rehomed right into my home, right? So I've taken in two rehomes, and I don't know the circumstances. I have a little story with my mastiff. My pit just was found roaming. Who knows if somebody just let her out? I have no idea. So those were rehomes that came into my life, right? So I was, from what I think, their second homes. I don't know for sure. It could have been their third or fourth home. Who knows? But they were both young when I got them. My first German Shepherd that I had as an adult, he was raised for a guide dog program. So he was born and raised until 8 weeks at the kennel, the facility. He was raised by one person for 16 months of his life. He came in for formal training. He was in the kennel and with me for 6 to, I'd say almost 8 months. Then he went and was placed as a guide dog. Unfortunately, he was attacked by a dog in the field, and couldn't recover from that. Came back to the kennel, then he came back to live the remainder of his life with me. So if you think about the transitions that dog went through, ideally he'd be raised, trained, and be with a guide dog handler until either he was retired at 10 or 11 and maybe came back to the organization, or lived the rest of his years with his person or family member, friend. So I think about that rehome situation, and welcomed into my life as a rehome, um, and that worked out great. He lived it. He passed unfortunately at 7.5 from cancer, young, so younger, right, a little younger. But he was with me in training, and then so about 4 years of his life were with me, and we had the best time. So again, that was a rehome situation that worked out for him, right, in that way. Um, our almost 12-year-old shepherd was also in a guide dog program. She was raised by a couple different fosters, and then she was placed into a pet home, right? And so Tao was raised as a guide dog puppy, became a breed dog, was here as well. So all of these dogs have found their way into my life, our life. And it was the first dog that I got from a breeder, um, because I wanted to do specific sports with him. So um, yeah, after my fifth dog, right, was one that I said, I'm gonna get a puppy. So I've had all rehomes. And how lucky have I been to have and receive that rehome? And I've always found that as like I've never known all the backstory. I'm sharing a little bit of backstory, but like I've just never felt like it was productive to have any judgment of why. Right? We don't understand why people make those decisions. I've worked at a lot of shelters where dogs were surrendered in, and a lot of times I would just ask somebody, is it from behavioral, because that's important information when I was assessing them to see where they're going to go to a rescue or being placed in a home if there are behavioral issues. And I've had people just say, hey, like I'm just too busy. This is a beautiful. There was a 1-year-old basset hound, purebred, beautiful. I'm like, why are you surrendering him? Oh, he does. I said, is there really anything wrong? And is it just, and they just said, no, it's just my lifestyle. I can't. And called up rescue. He was picked up that afternoon and went to a beautiful home. So no judgment, right? I think when, in terms of being a professional in the field, I really like to approach it from that because I've seen so much, and anything with our animals, making hard decisions is so, so difficult. And to be able to support people through that, I feel like is really a gift. And like, I don't ever like when it comes to that, but people are doing responsible things when they're rehoming at times. Sometimes it's not, right? But it's someone's life circumstances. And I like to believe that people try to do the best they can with what they know, in terms of dogs that end up in shelters or end up in situations and rehomes. I've, again, 4 of my dogs have been rehomes, and I've been so fortunate to have that. Um, Out of all my dogs, my first one was the most challenging. So other than that, I'm like, this has worked out really well. And still, I learned so much with her, and she was a fun, really fun dog. So thinking about that rehoming, and just we're just talking about it here, right? Like I'm always open. This video will be posted to my channel, and if you're stumbling upon this and like want to have opinions or talk about rehoming, I'm very open to that. If you have questions around that, I'm very open to doing that, because sometimes our life changes and we don't expect it, and that's life, right? It's not predictable. It's over. I guess the only consistent in life is change, right? My parents used to tell me that all the time, which is very true. The more years that go by, I'm like, things are always changing. So approaching rehoming from that, right? And if you're finding yourself in that situation, knowing that there's resources out there for you and there's support for you, and helping you to coach through that. With that being said, when somebody calls me, I'm always really open and honest to have any of those conversations, even from a first phone call with somebody, if they want to talk to me about that. And sometimes I just share open and honestly based on what they're saying, where the work can be if they want to work with me and if I'm the right match. Sometimes I refer people to other trainers who are more experts in certain things, if they should choose to keep a dog when some of the behaviors might be a little bit of safety issues, right? There's certain people that specialize in aggression and different types of things. But yeah, I'm always here to work with people. So right, to work with you on any behavioral things to enhance your relationship and have it so you can have really long, healthy, awesome life with your dog, right? Then I'm also here too to have some tough conversations or help to talk to you about, um, even just talking about it, right? And being open about it. So again, um, rehoming. So today we covered dogs, different dog breeds. Again, all of these topics, we could go on and on. We're just touching on them. We talked about dogs with jobs. Thank you, Carolyn, for the awesome question on reactivity. We did a little as deep dive as we can do in one of our sessions here on reactivity. And again, we have these every month. So if you're playing around with this, anybody that's working with dog reactivity, you want to revisit next month, jump on here. You can give some feedback and we can keep continuing that conversation. And then we talked a little bit about rehoming. So something I'm also always open to talking about with everybody out there. So I'll stay on a few minutes and answer any other questions. But thank you all for joining and being here. And